Well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Jayme Walters. First, I have to say some great things about her. Jayme was just telling me about her upbringing in rural southern Illinois, in a small town near Carbondale, right? Yeah. She holds a PhD in social work from the University of Tennessee and a master's in social work from the University of Georgia. She is the executive director of Utah State University's Transforming Communities Institute. Dr. Walters' work is rooted in a lifelong commitment to advancing the well-being of underserved communities through collaborative and data-informed approaches. Her scholarship focuses on community and nonprofit development and on addressing urgent social issues such as substance abuse and housing and food insecurity. Since joining USU in 2020, I can't believe that's all it's been, really, has engaged in and earned numerous honors for research, teaching, and community engagement, including national recognition from the Community on Social Work Education and several university and college level awards. In addition, Dr. Walters was recently appointed to the Utah Supreme Court Committee on Regulatory Reform. Next week, she will receive the University of Tennessee's Alumni Promise Award. Dr. Walters lives in Logan with her husband, Jonathan, who is a chef and director of USU's SNAC, or Student Nutrition Access Center. They have a daughter, Katie, and 3 dogs. We're very fortunate to have with us today Dr. Jayme Walters, and I welcome her to begin her talk.
All right, well, like many people in helping professions, I found my way to social work because of the challenges that my family experienced when I was a kid. I grew up in a small community in southern Illinois, surrounded by cornfields, so just drive about 3 minutes in any direction, that's what you're gonna see. The resources there, though, were pretty limited for those who did without. So every issue I talk about today is an issue that I know very well. We moved houses regularly for one reason or another, including foreclosure. I know what it's like to stand in line at a food pantry or watch my mom use food stamps and see others look on in disgust. I know what it's like to not have access to healthcare and not be able to go to the dentist or access a mental health provider. I watched my mom's vehicle be repossessed, lifted onto a tow truck, and hauled away. The help that we received often came from small grassroots groups or churches. The systems that were in place that were meant to help people in poverty didn't help us. And those issues with the challenges with that system impacted my adulthood, far into my adulthood. So I'm invested in these issues that I'll talk about today and into the community well-being, because not only because I've experienced these challenges, but I'm a community member too. And I care about our neighbors and our friends. And you'll find that the same is true for the faculty, staff, and students and the community partners that we work alongside every single day. So, I often get asked, why did I choose Utah State? I don't have any connection to Utah. I have lived in several states before, but in the Midwest and South. But I chose Utah State because of our land-grant mission, which is a commitment to ensure that our research and teaching and service benefits Utahns. So the work of the Transforming Communities Institute aligns perfectly with this responsibility.
Communities are often facing very complex challenges: housing, homelessness, food insecurity, health issues. Sometimes they feel desperate to address this issue that's impacting their daily lives. The Transforming Communities Institute was founded in 2022, and it came about because community leaders and residents needed access to people who knew how to do research and sort of lead a process to develop solutions that could address those problems. We start by assembling our table, and our table is that community partner panel that's made up of faculty, staff, and students, and those community leaders and residents who might be experiencing that problem.
We're looking to build individuals, looking to build communities, community partners, and then the towns and cities that we live in.
We're working side by side with them to design and implement and evaluate those projects that we're carrying out.
We had some very specific needs in working with unsheltered households. TCI was able to bring in additional volunteers to help us to engage with those folks. They helped us with survey results and information that we wouldn't otherwise have access to.
We work to facilitate community-engaged research and solution building, as well as community education and professional development. These activities allow us to give students experiences that are hands-on, that prepare them for whatever kind of practice that they're going into, which could be social work, could be teaching, so that whenever they go into the field, they can work effectively in communities. Our vision is to help communities create a space where people feel welcome and safe and healthy.
All right. So our work spans across Utah and involves collaborators from every college across our campus, as well as an extension. And they are invested too in these issues because they are community members and they are impacted by these issues. We have community residents and leaders and professionals from government sector, nonprofits, businesses, churches involved in the work that we're doing. We're working side by side with them, and we're doing the work that's relevant to their lives and to the communities that they're living in. Today, I'll focus mostly on our community engaged research and solution building work that TCI does. However, I wanted to mention the efforts in community education and professional development. One of our goals is to provide professionals and community members with access to quality research. When I started this position, and it was clear as a new PhD that not everyone who needed access to evidence had access to that evidence. And so we launched an open access journal focused on sharing community-based research and practice knowledge. We also provide professional training events where social workers and other professionals can get access to new practices, new research, and can get free continuing education units as they do that training. So over the course of the last 3 years, we've trained about 2,000 people and saved them about $73,000 in continuing education. So that work is really exciting, and we will continue to do that. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about just what community engaged research and solution building is, and then I'll share some case studies in the next section. When we talk about community, community is more than just geography. Community is, it could be a shared interest, it could be that a group of people working for the same organization, it could be a hobby, it could be that you attend the same church, it could be that you have other similar identities that you share. So when we talk about community, realize that it's used much more broad than you would think in terms of like on a map. What is community engaged research? And I think if you talk to the people who do this work, we might define it in a different way. But I think that the defining feature that everyone will say and that we have in common is that it's collaboration. And this is research that we're doing with community members. So with being the key word there. We're not studying the community. We're working with the community. We're not doing research on the community. We're doing research with the community. So community members are treated as equals, equal partners, and they lead and participate in every part of the work that we're doing. From the inception of the study, so they're literally helping with the design of the research, to actually carrying out the study, so collecting the data, helping to analyze the data, put it into reports, and then helping us disseminate that information. Sometimes we're able to work together to use that data to inform some kind of solution process as well. Again, every project looks different because the projects are shaped by the community and the issue that you're working on. It's also shaped by the people who are involved. So the projects I'll describe today are similar in that we were collaborating with groups of people, but how they came to us, how they played out, all very different. I do want to share some really important core principles of this work. One of the most important things to remember that sort of differentiates this kind of research from maybe a traditional approach is that this work centers the community's needs and priorities. Academia is sometimes known for centering on their interests. And certainly there's value in producing knowledge for the sake of knowledge. What we're doing is focusing on those things that community members bring to us. And often what happens is a community member, a community professional, a leader will come to us and say, there's this problem and we want to know more about it and we want to see something change, or we want to find a solution to address this. How can you help us? So that question or that need drives what we do. The second principle that we take into account is mutual benefit. And while we center the needs of communities, we also know that in this process, people who are working in universities also stand to benefit from this. So it's not that that researchers aren't able to get publications and presentations and writing grants out of this process. They get all of those things. Plus, they're meeting a need in the community that wasn't met before. So the third principle is the recognition of strengths and assets. Everyone comes to the table with a set of skills and knowledge and experiences that they can contribute to the process. So recognizing what those are and using that to further the process is really critical. The fourth principle is acknowledging community context. Context matters. We're talking about certainly the expertise, but also traditions and lived experience and other things that contribute to what makes a community. That's just as valuable as academic expertise. Also, part of that is cultural humility, realizing that you don't know everything about a community or the issue that is impacting the community. So taking a step back and realizing that the experts are in front of you. Finally, flexibility and adaptability. We work hard to develop these plans to do these research projects or these solution building projects, and the plans look fantastic. Those plans usually go out the window pretty fast. And that's because we can't anticipate all of the barriers and challenges that are going to come up. And that's okay, as long as you're willing to adapt and be flexible in the process. It will happen. It may not always happen on the timeline that you had hoped for, but if you stay the course and work through those problems with your community partners, you can make that happen. All right. Why it matters and works. Community engaged research is built on reciprocity and relevance and relationships. The issues that we're tackling are the ones that communities prioritize. So the research stays real, it's practical, and it is respectful of the culture and context. And when the communities are part of this process, they are more invested, the data is richer, and the outputs that we produce actually lead to the outcomes that they're hoping for. So community engaged research allows the shift in power that local knowledge and lived experience are just as important as academic expertise. And at the end of the day, we're building this trust that hopefully will strengthen these partnerships that will allow us to do this work on a long-term basis. This work is shaping policy, it's shaping programs, it's shaping practices that ultimately go into improving people's well-being and their quality of life. All right, so I'm going to dive into some case studies here. These projects span the state, and sometimes I try. Lisa, you said I can't believe it's just been 5 years. Well, these projects, even though it's only been 5 years, these projects take a long time. We're talking about investments of 2 to 3 years into these programs. So there's a lot of details involved. I can't share them all, but certainly welcome questions at the end about them. So the first one that we'll talk about is the WAB Warming Center. So I mentioned The problems that we work on with communities are brought to us by different people. And this particular issue of homelessness and housing insecurity was brought to us by one of our students who was placed in an agency providing homeless outreach in Logan. And so part of their job was to go out and provide supplies and food to people living in places not meant for human habitation. So their cars, storage units, you name it. The sad part was that she would deliver these items and, in the dead of winter and not be able to provide them with referral to an agency because no shelter existed that served the entire general population. And so the closest shelter that we had to Logan at that time was about an hour away through a canyon with no public transportation. Not optimal. So she had this idea of a warming center. A warming center, compared to a traditional shelter, is only open for about half the year. In our case, as I'll share, it's open at the end of November through mid-April, and it's only open at night. So, as I mentioned, there was not a homeless shelter until, or as of January 2022. And how we approached this is that we decided that we would start with a community assessment. We already knew that homelessness was a problem. We didn't need to do an assessment for that. What we did need to understand, though, is how the community felt about this particular idea. And so we conducted this survey, and what we found was that 92% of respondents who took the survey felt like there was a need for a warming center. So we took that information, and that drove us to develop the WAB Warming Center. So that launched in December 2022. That was our first season, and we're about to enter our fourth season. This doesn't always happen, but I just happen to stay on as part of this project, and I'm currently the board president for this organization. And it's been really a lot to do and a big need to fill in our community, but these are the numbers. So this last season, we served just over 200 people. We don't anticipate this number decreasing. However, the promises I feel like we have ahead of us is that this effort has brought in an additional $600,000 of state funding to our region. It allows our community, including many USU students and faculty, staff, and general community members, to be able to have a place where they can go and give back to people who are unhoused. To the tune of about 20,000 hours, so it's a lot. And then thousands of dollars in supplies and donations to make us operate. With this community effort, this buy-in, that really just started with that assessment, right? We had buy-in from the beginning from a lot of different partners, and that just continued to grow. So with that investment came, the support to be able to run the warming center. But now we're in discussions of what would it look like for us to have a year-round center. And it's a critical need. But without that community buy-in, we wouldn't be able to have those discussions. And we have also assisted other cities to be able to open their own centers. So the SNAC Impact Study, this was convened by Jonathan, the director of SNAC, who was new to his role and wanted to better understand the food security issues facing students after COVID. He also wanted to understand how SNAC was impacting the students who were using it. So we worked with them to develop a research project that was a part of our social work program and the nutrition and dietetics program, where students were able to get hands-on research and then take that data to develop some mini solutions. So what we found as part of that assessment was that 62%, which was almost double from pre-COVID days, 62% of students were experiencing low and very low food security. So what were the outcomes for this project? SNAP was able to take this information and propose a $3 per semester student fee. And that has led them to be able to increase their food budget by $120,000 annually. So just think about how much food that can buy. They were also able to go back to Utah Food Bank, who supports them every single month with a food distribution. But they were able to take that data back to them to say, look at the need. It's increased dramatically. We need more assistance. And they took that information and they were able to increase their distribution by thousands of pounds every month. They were also able to establish a community food pantry, mobile food pantry, and so they're able to provide more support to the community as well. They were able to increase their donations and money and food through university projects and initiatives, and students served increased from about 4,000 to 5,000 as part of this effort. The third case study that we have focuses on LGBTQ well-being in northern Utah. This particular project came to us, it started with an email from one of our social work alums who said, she's a school social worker, and she had in her community two students, two teenagers, die by suicide who identified as LGBTQ. She had families in her school that needed support. She reached out because she wanted some help identifying resources. I went to the people I know in the area to ask what's available, and I found nothing specific that I could provide for her and for her the students that she was serving. So it was something that was hard to go back and have that conversation with her. And so as we were talking, I talked about through this assessment process. So she dove in with us to design a community assessment. We carried it out with one of our MSW classes. It ended up being that we worked on this project for a couple of years. But in this first assessment, the top issue was bullying. And some of the top solutions that those survey respondents shared were safe spaces and support groups. And from this project, of course, it increased the knowledge and awareness among service providers and among the public. But it also informed the development of the Bear River Region LGBTQ+ Community Coalition. And that group now is focusing on advocacy as well as organizing those organizations and residents and groups who are invested in ensuring the well-being of individuals and families who need that support. And then it also informed a second regional assessment to identify potential solutions. So that work is ongoing. The next, the final case study here is the Community Justice Advocate Program. So as I've described, these things come to us in different ways. So this particular project was convened by the Utah Bar Foundation and Judge Rich Mrazek, who is a third district court judge. And they came to us to say that they had this idea of social workers or other helping professionals being able to provide limited scope legal services to individuals who were struggling with debt collections.
More than 100 million Americans are burdened with medical bills they can't pay.
Mounting student loan debt.
And people are taking on more credit card debt.
Overall household debt is also at a record high.
Will we remember 2025 as a moment when U.S. consumers finally borrowed too much?
Debt is pretty much just a fact of life. In fact, the average American carries an average debt of about $105,000. Now, the average Utahn, though, carries an average debt of about $141,000, putting us at about 5th highest in the nation. Now, debt is pretty normal and fairly manageable for the most part, but take this as an example of how this can quickly spiral out of control.
Imagine with me, if you will, this is you and your young family. With your growing family, you've got to buy a house, and that's going to cost you. And then you come to realize, like, your kitchen, it's out of date, it needs to be remodeled. So that'll also cost you. Then lightning strikes your roof, got to get that fixed. Can't have a leaky roof. You get in a fender bender on your way to work. You need your car to get to work. To make matters worse, your kid falls out of a tree, breaks their arm, got to pay to get their arm fixed. And before you know it, your credit card debt is mounting. You can't make the house payment anymore. You've got a debt collector coming after you, trying to get you to pay your bills, and your life is spiraling out of control.
Thank you, Jackson, for actually doing that. It did take quite a few takes to make that work. Here we go. Ready, set?
Yeah, here we go.
Here we go.
So it's time to. Oh, this is you.
Hang on
And
a second.
right hand on the card.
Your opposite. Whatever this one is. That's your right hand. Hang on. Let's just restart one more time. Anyway, in 2022, the Utah Bar Foundation published this report, in which they found that debt claims have accounted for 85% of all general civil legal claims filed in Utah district courts. In 500,000 debt-related cases, nearly all defendants are individuals who don't have legal counsel. And about 71% of debt-related cases resulted in default judgment, which means the defendant either didn't respond to the lawsuit or just didn't show up to court.
When people do have valid defenses, they don't really know how to assert those in their case. Then the debtor is sort of at the mercy of the creditor to be able to figure out the way to move forward.
Seeing this, the Utah Supreme Court effectively opened the door for USU to help step in through their Transforming Communities Institute, which helps to solve social justice issues a little bit like this.
The Transforming Communities Institute exists to co-create knowledge and build solutions with communities in Utah. A community member or a community leader might come to us and say that we have a need. We will work with a group of people from that community to understand what's going on with that problem. So that's where TCI comes in. And we'll work with them to design a study to help understand that issue. And then hopefully they'll use that data to be able to develop a solution. And if they want to work with us from that point on, we're excited to do that.
So in this particular case, TCI worked with a district court judge, the Utah Bar Foundation, lawyers, social workers, and other human service professionals to develop the Community Justice Advocate Program, which is currently training its first cohort of social workers to help provide legal advice, especially in regards to debt collection, such as helping a client respond to a debt collector or read and understand a demand letter, or even just prepare for court by helping them understand the process and collect potential evidence for their case.
At its core, it's a program to increase access for Utahns and offer legal services to people who can't afford an attorney.
It's an opportunity to sort of bring that service to them, meet them where they're at, and help them resolve those issues.
So the students will go through about 10 weeks of education, and then they'll go through about 10 weeks of intensive supervision with a lawyer, and they'll leave us with a certificate that allows them to be able to provide this service in their agencies to individuals who might need access to legal services.
So why are social workers the right fit for this? Well, a couple of reasons actually. The first is that their training, licensing, and code of ethics are all similar enough to lawyers in that they're obligated to help their clients in a similar way. But secondly, they already sort of have these pre-existing relationships with their clients, meaning they're already hearing about a lot of these issues as it is, but now with this certificate, they can help provide support to their clients in a better way.
A large majority of my clients are currently having their wages garnished or are in the process of debt collection. So having this certification allows me as a social worker to better help them through that process.
A lot of my clientele are experiencing issues with debt. The common consensus is that they just don't know how to handle it and it overwhelms them. So the CJA certificate will help it so that I'm more educated and I can help lead them in the right direction.
Now, this is just the first cohort of students going through this program, but the idea is that in the future, they want to expand to other legal issues that Utahns are facing.
Looking at housing issues, domestic violence, family law, disability law, these are all things that have come up in conversation when we talk to people. People are very excited about this potential.
Ultimately, we want to prove this model that social workers and other trained helping professionals are more than competent to be able to provide this kind of like legal triage and to ensure that all Utahns across the state have access to the justice system and they have access to legal advice when they need it most.
Okay, so far, we just trained our first cohort of CJAs, 21 of them to be exact, and they wrapped up their training at the end of July. And they're currently in provisional certification status, so they have to do 10 cases and 10 hours of supervision before they're officially certified. So that's CJAs across the state who are doing this work. We're also testing out standalone CJA services. So what that means is that these CJAs, some of them are serving as volunteers for Nonprofit Legal Services of Utah, and we're partnering with a few select organizations that can refer them directly to those volunteer CJAs. And so the point of that is that they don't necessarily have to be a client of a particular agency to get a service. So we're testing it out to see how this works, and hopefully, if it does work, then that model means that the general public can access these services rather than having to go and be a client at another agency for another reason. And then we will launch our next cohort of debt collections of students in January. And we're looking at additional topic areas and potentially a 4-credit option for current students. So I wanted to just read this. One of our CJAs wrote just a testimonial of a case that she worked on. And so I wanted to share because I was just so excited about it. She said, "My most recent client, John, in his 70s, and suffered a major medical emergency that left him with a hefty pile of medical bills. During his long road to recovery, John struggled to pay his mounting bills and found it difficult to make ends meet. He found himself living mostly off Social Security payments, as it was difficult for him to continue working with his injury as a real estate agent in Utah's already slow housing market. Despite his challenging circumstances, John spoke with enthusiasm and gratitude at the first time we talked on the phone. He expressed deep appreciation for the opportunity to have an advocate who could not only help him to understand the recent court summons he had received and how to respond, but who could also walk him through the process of how he could contact his creditors and seek settlements and arrange for reasonable monthly payments that he could manage with confidence. Just days after helping John craft his first letter, seeking a settlement, he called me to report that the creditors were willing and even eager to drop their lawsuit for the $13,000 that he owed. Instead, they worked with him on creating a feasible plan for repayment. It was incredibly satisfying to see the enormous dividends generated by arming John with simple yet solid information, and information that allowed him to effectively navigate an otherwise seemingly complex and scary legal system. Just as John was so full of gratitude for my help as a CJA, I too am grateful for the CJA program that armed me with the knowledge and skills needed to make a real difference in the lives of people like John." So looking ahead, just maybe even a look back. Over the past 3 years, we've worked on 15 major projects across Utah. And I won't read all these numbers, but you can see how many people are involved in this work and all the outputs that come out of this work. But most importantly, all the outcomes that this work leads to. But what if we could do more? Currently, how we tend to approach work in academia, or sometimes even in the government and nonprofit sector, is that we work in silos. We have an organization doing this work in homelessness and housing over here, and another one doing the same work over here. Or in the case of when we worked on the snack project, we found out that there were multiple researchers across campus doing research on food insecurity, but they weren't connected with each other. Sometimes we come together, and a lot of times it's just by happenstance. It's an accident. Oh, you work on that? I work on that too. We should probably collaborate together. But what if we had a way that we could maximize resource and reduce the duplication of efforts as we respond to these community needs? Would the impact be greater? I think probably so. So we're looking at a couple of different solutions for collective impact. So one is around having a lab specific to TCI, where individuals who are interested in studying and doing things like assessments and solution building related to social determinants of health can work together and on those projects that are specific to those topics. But more broadly, we're looking at a university-wide network that would allow faculty, staff, and students and community partners to more easily connect with each other and share about opportunities and also share the needs that they have and give them the ability to easily collaborate with each other. That doesn't currently exist, but we're going to lead that effort. And the other piece of this is being able to collect and measure and demonstrate impact. So much work is happening across the university. So much work is being done across the state. It's not being tracked very well. The investments that the university is making into the communities, we share these one-off stories and they're awesome. But what if we could report on all the work that's being done? So what I want you to take away from this presentation, USU can be a valuable partner in what we do. Faculty, staff, students are excited and ready to contribute. The community engaged process, it can lead to useful data that informs viable solutions. And finally, these issues impacting communities, they are complex. These solutions that it will take to address these issues have to be multifaceted, and they have to have community buy-in. That's what I have for you today.
Jayme, you've given us so much to think about, and I think in your first 5 years now at USU, you've opened so many doors. And with that, I just want to reiterate that your goals for more university-wide type activities are absolutely something we should be striving for as the land-grant institution of Utah. So with that, one of the greatest parts of these presentations is the engagement that we participate in after our speaker finishes. And so I've got a microphone and I'm going to run it around the room. And we would love to hear from all of you. Questions, comments, thoughts. The way Jayme's work always starts is someone comes to her with an issue. So something's probably rolling around out there we could talk about. See, I told it'll get going.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Clark Riblinger, USU Counseling and Prevention Services. Love what you're presenting. I'm all on board. I feel very much though that the community sometimes has a almost like a mistrust of research at times, and so I'm wondering if you're finding that that is influencing what you're doing as far as because you rely on people to come to you, and so I wonder if that may impact how you show up in the community in return.
That's a great question, and that's a common question that we get from new faculty. How do I even start this? While I do believe actually we have, there's more people in the community who value research than maybe what we believe. There is this existing belief that sort of the university is sort of out of their reach, or it's not something that I can be a part of. So what I recommend, especially new faculty or people who just want to do this work, is to actually just be involved in the community. Go out and do volunteer work and join a board, or talk to people, go to networking events, not with the goal of I want to do research with them, but that I want to help my community. And then making that, establishing those relationships, building that rapport, those things are going to emerge naturally. People ask you what you do, and then you tell them, I'm a researcher. And then they're like, well, you're not so bad. I have this need. Could you help me with it? So that's exactly how, I've done this work, and how many of my colleagues do this work. They're invested in these issues, and so they make themselves a part of them before they start digging in so much.
Jayme, thank you for such a wide-ranging and yet focused overview. Are you finding, as you're working at the university levels, with the idea of community buy-in, are they beginning to bridge into the other levels of access, such as high schools, junior high, elementaries, families that literally are in the communities and may not have ties to the universities? Mm-hmm. And how do you see that expanding and bridging? Because you brought up a very good point. You're discovering right on UV, up at Utah State campus, you're recognizing that there was more and more studies and research going on. So wonderful. You're bringing that awareness in. Is it reflecting into the community buy-in as it spreads throughout the layers and levels of application?
Good question. Yeah, I think that that's a challenge that we recognize and that our administration recognizes as well, that there are opportunities to improve those relationships and to make sure that we are meeting our land grant mission. Again, researchers and educators and staff members are doing amazing work. It's just not communicated well. So I think that we have a lot of work to do to build that trust with our communities, and then also just make it easier, because again, right now there's really no mechanism in place that allows a community member or an organization to easily access those researchers or those educators. So that's what we'll start working on soon with the investments from the Office of Research, our College of Arts and Sciences, Student Affairs, to build some kind of network and mechanism so that it's much easier for faculty or for community members and organizations to get their needs met, and so that they can access those people who have those tools to be able to do that work. But it's definitely a work in progress.
Well, often you hear about the extension service throughout the state that has a long trusted relationship. I envision this happening with what you're doing.
Yeah, Extension is a big part of this. The great thing about Extension is that they have specialists all over the state. And so those are natural connecting points for us. And in our work with TCI, we rely on them to make those connections. And so maybe they're not doing research with us all the time, but they are definitely the connectors. They are connecting to organizations and people with lived experience, and also providing us data.
Dr. Walter, you kind of touched on this when you talked about the silos. And just as human beings, we become very insular. We become very wanting to form our own group and be in our own silo. And building community in the instant thing is one deal, and we could build up and lift up a community. But oftentimes, there's resentment and mistrust from neighboring communities. You could see yesterday, before anybody knew anything, the accusations are flying between one and everybody else. And this is just something we're coming to. How do we, or does the TCI want to examine how we might be able to lift Group A without Group B, C, and D going, well, why are they getting this benefit?
That's a really great question. We work with all kinds of people and who come from different backgrounds and have their own set of experiences and values. And so part of our facilitation work is to help those groups of people identify their shared values and their shared goal. People often come to the table with, again, certainly their own ideas, right? And how they perceive what the issue is and how they want to approach it. But if we can start from what we have in common, and some of that is, a lot of it is skilled facilitation, because you're right, people want to sort of gravitate towards the differences. I believe this, you believe this, we can't work together. But identifying what they have in common. And often what we find is that the people are there for the same reason. They may not have the same ideas for how to get there, but they have the same kind of motivation. So helping them see that you have this motivation, they have the same motivation, we have these shared values, let's move forward in this direction. And so it's not that we have to agree on everything, but we have to agree on at least how we approach this problem, this one problem. Is it that difficult? Yes, it is difficult. That is part of the reason why these projects take a while. But that investment to address those issues, totally worth it.
I have a question about your definition of a community. Is it a large city, city of a certain size? I know I've been here about 10 years. And when we first moved here, we had a certain area here in Salt Lake that was just a large number of homeless people. And that number has dwindled, and I'm not sure whether it's been relocated to other areas or I think some of it's been done by opening up centers where these people can go at night. Have you got any input on that? The size of the community you normally work with, and what happened to this community that was in Salt Lake City?
So again, we define community in a lot of different ways. So it can be about geography. It can be about the size of the city. We've worked with all kinds of communities across the state, rural, suburban, urban. But community can also be defined as a shared characteristic. So I view individuals who are unhoused or experiencing homelessness as a community themselves. And so, as we're talking about solutions, they're involved in these kinds of processes. I can't speak to sort of maybe how that population that you're talking about dispersed, but certainly more solutions have come online to address homelessness, especially over the last decade. And hopefully we'll see more solutions come about that address the root issue of homelessness as well.
So in the news recently, we've been looking at, there's been a lot of news about the new building of a campus for people experiencing homelessness on the west side of Salt Lake. I'm curious to know what some of the questions you have as a researcher as you're reading the news and as you're looking at this proposed solution, what things you might be hoping for that this might contain, and what some of the concerns you might have from your own lived experiences.
I felt like this was going to come up. As many of us do in this room, I wear multiple hats. And so, of course, I'm here representing USU. I'm also the board president for our local warming center. And so I might come at this in a couple different ways. As a researcher who does community engaged research and solution building, I have empathy for wanting to develop a solution that addresses the problem. I think that I also have empathy for the timeline, right? And the pressure that leaders feel to address this as quickly as possible. I think that because of those pressures, sometimes we speed through processes in a way that don't always allow us to get the perspectives of all people who are impacted by a potential problem, as well as people who will be impacted by the solution we're putting on the table. And so while I'm sure, I know that there are benefits to what's being done here, I think some of the pushback has to do with sort of the process itself. And so I think as we in Logan look towards year-round shelter, we will continue to use a community engaged process of ensuring that we have the perspectives of the people, certainly of who are experiencing the issue and who will use the center, as well as those who might have concerns about a shelter in their area. And of course, all the service providers who bring their expertise to the table. So it's a difficult thing. Homelessness is so complex because people end up homeless for a lot of different reasons. So it's hard to develop a solution that encompasses all of those things. So I hear both sides of it. It's so hard.
Hi, Jayme. Thank you for your talk today. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the future of the CJA program in particular. USU does not have a law school, yet it was chosen through TCI to provide CJA training that's there, which I think is a huge testament to the impact of community engaged research. And I'm imagining that this is already having impacts on the court system and soon will. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that future too.
So this is so exciting. I don't want to put you on spot, Haley, but I want to recognize Haley Cousin, who sort of started the CJA initiative across the state. She was the first program in the state to be able to do this kind of work. So kudos to her. We used her, part of her model and as well as another model to help get us where we are and take what works and develop sort of our own thing. So we're excited that we're sort of in this now. It took us a while to get there, but we're in it now. I think that there's such an opportunity for growth in terms of even just in the debt collection side. This is a massive problem, as you saw in that video. There are people who are very excited about engaging in this training, and so obviously being able to offer these additional cohorts ongoing would be ideal. We're also looking at that 4-credit option where current students, and that's where we see a lot of the interest, is that how can I do this? Like our social work students or other students who are in similar professions saying like, I want to do this, how can I do this? So we're starting to explore that as well, what it looks like for them to be able to do that as a student. And then, of course, looking at other areas. There certainly debt collections isn't the only area of need, and so how can we expand our reach in that way? So I think there's just so much on the horizon, and I think we're only limited by our capacity and resources.
Any other questions? Yes, one right here.
Maybe just a quick comment. Some of us graduated a long time ago, but hopefully we learned something, and I actually learned a lot. I got a master's in sociology, and long story short, looking at my own life, I just retired, I'm 76, I dedicate at least 20% of my time at the Utah State Prison. I've been doing it for 45, 50 years now.
That's amazing.
And I was just thinking of last Sunday, in a volunteer situation, in the middle of the chapel, 25 guys, 23 are gangsters, 5 different gangs. That's pretty amazing. And so it can be done. And I think, as you said, when we interact in circumstances, as you've said so well, what do we do? Where's our passion? And we actually, if we went to college, I like to believe in applied education. That's why I so much enjoyed that. But my only comment would be, I don't care who we are, we can go do something, and we need to. And I'm telling you, those men that I've been working with for so many years, I've seen some incredible changes of their lives, and that's what we're capable of.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I think it's absolutely, we all have something to offer. I think it's also going back to the idea that we all have strengths and recognizing what those are.
Hi, Matt Anderson from Utah Food Bank. I have a two-parter, and maybe we're at the part of this where we do the project pitch, the pitches. I'm not sure if that was on the agenda, but I guess my first question is, if we have a project idea or we have that needs statement, how do we go about kind of submitting that? And then the second part is I have a need. And maybe you could talk a little bit about maybe the power of that third-party perspective, because one of the things Utah Food Bank has been challenged with from our larger Feeding America network is conducting first a service area assessment, but then an operational response plan. But an operational response plan that's informed by neighbor experience. So now we have to be challenged with figuring out, okay, how do I engage my community? How do I engage those neighbors that we serve? So then we can get feedback on how we might be able to that can inform our practices or inform our strategic plan moving forward. But that's not necessarily our expertise in doing that, and that's kind of a tall task because our service area is the entire state. And so it's a big kind of undertaking for us. And how do we insulate ourselves from any critical feedback that we might be able to get, right? Because like when the organization that's conducting the engagement, how do we prevent ourselves from becoming defensive, right? And some of the stuff that we might hear back, and really seek that understanding, and then also encourage people to be honest, because a lot of the folks that we serve don't want to come off as being ungrateful of the support that they are currently getting.
Great questions. First, thank you for being here. and you all do great work. If you have a project, you can certainly send us an email, send me an email, and we'll meet with you and figure out if we have the ability to help you. Third-party perspective, yeah, I think it goes back to what we bring to the table is that we have the resources of the university. We have researchers, we have educators, people who are knowledgeable in your area of practice, who can contribute sort of the expertise around research, but also in the context of food security. So there's that. It's also sometimes easier for us to be the ones to deliver some of that information as opposed to you, sort of the lead delivering that information back to your organization. How do you not be defensive? Part of that's on us, right, as researchers, that we try to frame things in a way that is not pointing to necessarily pointing to it as weakness, more of like areas of growth. You're doing great work. Here are ways that you can improve upon that. Certainly things are hard to hear, especially because you're doing, again, great work and you're working so hard and you're putting in all the hours and what more could we do? So I think it's along with framing what those areas of growth are, or what are some recommendations that we have so you can address some of those things. I would never want to provide that kind of critique without some kind of solution in mind, or at least a recommendation, right? Because that sort of creates this idea of certainly defensiveness, but also hopelessness, because you as in a nonprofit world, you always have more need than you could ever address. So we try to be very careful and sensitive to that, knowing that you're doing the best you can do with the limited resources that you have available.
Well, Jayme, I think we'll bring this to a close, but thank you for the information you shared, your thoughts, and let's give Jayme a nice round of applause. Now, a couple points as you get up and get ready to leave. We're always looking to improve. That's part of what we do in the academic world. And so you have a short survey in front of you on the table if you want to complete and leave it on your table, I think. Is that correct from my team? That's correct. That would give us great feedback. Second of all, please keep an eye out. This Blue Plate Research Series, as I said, is sponsored by Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we look forward to bringing you additional interesting topics in the future. And finally, just thank you for being here today. I know we don't have air conditioning in the room today, and it might have made it a little warmer than usual, but we just really value having your input and thoughts. And thank you for supporting our research at Utah State University, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.